Welcome to World History. This is Unit 2, The Classical Civilizations, Lesson 2, Ancient Greece, Part 2. Our central question: was ancient Athens truly democratic? That's a good question. And our agenda and our goal statement: I will look at Athenian democracy and analyze if it was really a true democratic society. Let's begin. Democracy in Greece's Golden Age. Democratic principles flourished during Greece's Golden Age. In comparison to the Athenian and United States democracy, both of the governments have political power exercised by citizens. There are three branches of government. There's a legislative branch, which passes laws, executive branch, which carries out laws, and judicial branch, which conducts trials with paid jurors. However, there are some differences. The Athenian democracy, citizens were male only, 18 years old, born of citizen parents. In the United States, citizens are born in the United States or completed the citizenship process. The laws voted on in Athens were also proposed directly by the Assembly of all citizens. But in the United States, representatives elected to propose and vote on laws represent the people in government. In Athens, the leader is chosen by a lot, which is a way of choosing someone. In the United States, representatives or presidents or leaders are elected through voting. The executive branch in Athens is composed of a council of 500 men. The executive branch in the United States is made up of elected and appointed officials. In Athens, the juries are varied in size. In the United States, they are composed of 12 jurors. In Athens, no attorneys and no appeals and 1 day trials, so trials are very quick. In the United States, defendants and plaintiffs have attorneys and have a long appeals process. Pause the video and take a look at this chart. Let's look at democracy in Greece's Golden Age a little bit further. Pericles had a plan for Athens. He was a skillful politician and an inspiring speaker, and a very well respected general. Um, he dominates the life in Athens from about 461 to 429 BC. A stronger democracy. Pericles hires more public officials and creates direct democracy. A direct democracy is citizens rule directly, not through representatives. Athenian Empire takes over the Delian League, and it uses the money to strengthen the Athenian fleet. Sparta and other cities resent the Athenian power. And that's an actual statue, a picture of Pericles from Greece in a museum. Athenians and Spartans go to war. First, let's talk about the Peloponnesian League. Sparta is the head of the Peloponnesian League, and there's tension built between the Delian and the Peloponnesian Leagues. Leaders in Athens and Sparta press for war. The Peloponnesian War. 431 BC, city states of Sparta and Athens go to war. This is the Peloponnesian War, when Sparta and Athens go to war. Sparta has a better army and Athens has a better navy. The plague strikes Athens in 430 BC, which is the year after they start the war, and it kills many, including Pericles. Sparta and Athens sign a truce in 421 BC. The plague. Doesn't that remind you of the coronavirus? Yes, it does. And so, therefore, plague and these kind of things have been going on for a long time. Sparta gains victory. In 415 BC, Athens renews war, attacks Syracuse, and is defeated in 413 BC. Athens and its allies surrendered to Sparta in 404 BC. Now, was ancient Athens truly democratic? Let's delve deeper into this subject. The two terms that are very important in this section was direct democracy and Peloponnesian War. Let's move on. Achievements in ancient Greek culture. Classical culture flourished during Greece's golden age. Glorious art and architecture. Let's start there. Pericles used the Delian League treasury to glorify Athens. He buys gold, ivory, marble, and hires artisans. The architecture and sculpture that Pericles builds includes the Parthenon, a large temple to honor the goddess Athena. Remember, we talked about Athena in the last section in part one. She was a daughter of Zeus in the mythology. Within the temple, the sculptor Phidias crafts 30-foot statue of Athena, and I know you're going to struggle with the way the words are spelled and things of this nature because I'm struggling with some of them as well. So that's okay. Sculptors create graceful, strong, perfectly formed figures, and these sculptures are very important because when we get to the Byzantine era, you will see that during the Dark Ages, that Europe lost the ability to sculpt and create graceful, strong, perfectly formed figures. And so the sculptures and things of this nature are not the same during the Byzantine Empire. And we'll talk about that during the Byzantine Empire. But remember that the architecture and the sculptures of this time period was supreme. Classical art means values harmony, order, balance, proportion, and beauty. That's what classical art means. It means that there is a way of doing everything in an orderly way. And this art form is lost at some point during the Dark Ages. Paintings. Greek painting was preserved on clay vessels. Most arts used two colors, red and black. Written sources tell of Greek murals. Scenes from the Iliad and the Odyssey were popular on these objects. Let's talk about poetry, drama, and history. The lyric poetry, Greeks create lyric poetry, and this type of poetry is accompanied with a lyre or a lyre. The lyric poems deal with emotions, not stories. Drama. Greeks invent drama as art form and build their first Western theaters. These theaters, as you can see to the right here in this picture, are very important in the culture. Actors wore colorful costumes and masks. Plays about leadership, justice, and duties to the gods were very popular. Here's a picture with the actors wearing the masks. Tragedy and comedy. Two forms of drama, tragedy and comedy. Tragedy tells the story of heroes' downfall, themes of love, hate, and war. Comedy makes fun of politics and respected people, slapstick humor. And this idea of tragedy comes back when? That's right, during the era of Shakespeare and the Elizabethan era. So it is lost during the Dark Ages and it comes back during the Renaissance and the Elizabethan era. So remember that. And remember the ancient Greeks did it first before Shakespeare. The Greek dramatists include these very special guys, including Euripides and Arist- Aristophanes and Aeschylus. I really struggle with those words, but that's okay. All right, history, my favorite point. Historians such as Herodotus, and Herodotus is like the first historian of ancient Greek times, very important. And Thucydides, Thucydides record and study past events. And they pioneered the accurate reporting of events and approaches that still guide historians today. Philosophers search for truth. Athenians lose confidence in the democratic government and question values. Philosophers, such as thinkers, who seek the truth and appear to try to help people understand what is truth. The Greek philosophers are based their philosophy on two assumptions. The universe is orderly with absolute laws, and people can understand those laws through logic and reason. Let's talk about the different philosophers. First, Socrates. Socrates believes in questioning, self examination of values and actions. He's convicted of corrupting the young people and sentenced to death in 399 BC. Yes, seeking truth was not always a good thing because people who like to lie to people don't want people to know the truth. So Socrates was punished. Plato. Plato is Socrates' student, and he wrote The Republic, his vision of a perfectly governed society. The person of great intellect and chosen to lead is Plato, and Plato becomes a very important person in ancient Greece. Aristotle. Aristotle questioned the nature of the world and human belief and knowledge. He invents a method for arguing, including um, the arguing according to the rules of logic. He applies this method to understand psychology, physics, and biology. He tutors a 13-year-old prince who becomes Alexander the Great. And in this painting, this is one of the philosophers who was forced to drink poison, and his students are crying. This is during the assassination of Socrates. All right, or not assassination, execution of Socrates. All right, so was ancient Athens truly democratic? The key terms of vocabulary in this section are classical art, lyric poetry, tragedy, comedy, philosopher, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Pause the video so that you can write those words down and put those definitions to the words. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great conquered Persia and Egypt and extended his empire to the Indus River in northwestern India. In other words, Alexander the Great actually went in to conquer places like what is present day Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan. Let's start with the person who ruled before Alexander the Great, Philip. Philip builds Macedonian power, and Macedonia is a kingdom of mountain villages north of Greece. Very beautiful statue to the right here that depicts how he looked. And Philip was a king. This is an actual picture of a statue that's in a museum of that time period of Philip. King Philip II was a ruler, a brilliant general, and dreams of controlling Greece. The Macedonians call themselves Greek. The rest of Greek does not call them Greek. Philip's army, so therefore, Philip wants to control Greece, but he's not considered a Greek, and he's considered a Macedonian. So, or an outsider. Philip's army creates a well-trained. Philip creates a well-trained professional army, and he plans to invade Greece from the north. The conquest of Greece. In 338 BC, the Macedonians defeat Greece. In 336, 2 years later, King Philip is murdered. His son is named King of Macedonia and becomes, you guessed it, Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great is the son of King Philip II. Alexander defeats Persia. Alexander is tutored by Aristotle and inspired by the Iliad. He has military training and he becomes king when he's 20 years old. He destroys Thebes to curb rebellion. The invasion of Persia is very important in Alexander's history because in 334 BC, Alexander invades Persia and quick victory over the Grantius River. And Darius III, which is pictured here on the right, and also an actual coin of Darius III here on the left, is the king of Persia and assembles an army of 50,000 to 75,000 men. And the Persian army is really big. And remember, the Persians are from the area around the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, so they can have a large population because they have the food to feed all of those people. So Alexander defeats the Persians again and forces the king of Persia to flee. So even though they have a large population, Alexander defeats them. Alexander also defeats Persia again. So, conquering the Persian Empire, Alexander marches into Egypt, and he was crowned the pharaoh in 332 BC. So, Alexander the Great actually becomes pharaoh of Egypt. At Gaugamela in Mesopotamia, Alexander defeats the Persians again. Alexander captures the cities of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. And Persepolis, the Persian capital, burned to the ground. The ashes of Persepolis signal total destruction of the Persian Empire. So Alexander the Great was truly a strong leader. So by this time, Alexander has taken over the River Valley civilization of Egypt, the River Valley civilization of Mesopotamia, and he's taken over Greece. There's three major uh, locations that he's taken over. So the fourth one, Alexander goes to India, and Alexander fights his way across the deserts of Central Asia to India, and he conquers the Indus Valley area in 326 BC. He reluctantly returns to Babylon, and this is where he dies in 323 BC. So he didn't live, a long life. He was young when he died, but being a young man, he actually conquered almost all of the River Valley civilizations except for China. So think about all of those Greek people who were soldiers and Macedonians who were soldiers who followed him. And of course, they intermingled and mixed with the peoples of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and of India. Alexander's legacy. Alexander melts the Greek and Persian cultures together. So we just talked about how those armies came down from Greece with Alexander, conquered these river valley civilizations, and actually intermingled and mixed with those people. So that cultural diffusion happened between the Alexander the Great's people, which are Macedonians and the Greeks, and the Africans of Egypt and the Southwest Asians. And so, therefore, it was very important to those cultures a change or pivot in their cultural identities. The empire becomes three kingdoms. And also, on a side note, Alexander's wife was a Persian, so she was a Persian woman. But this empire becomes three kingdoms: Macedonia, the Greek city states, Egypt, and the Old Persia, and that is also known as Seleucid Kingdom. Seleucid Kingdom. Sorry, y'all. All right. So, therefore, you have the Old Persia, Egypt, Greek city states, and Macedonia. That's four. All right. So, the key terms and vocabulary for this section: Philip II, Macedonia; Alexander the Great, and Darius III. Was ancient Athens truly democratic? Let's continue and look at it. The Hellenistic culture. The Hellenistic culture, and I'm going to um, just kind of move this. There we go. The Hellenistic culture is a blend of Greek and other influences, and they flourished throughout the Greek, Egyptian, and Asian areas. Okay, so this Hellenistic culture was brought to these areas by the Macedonian king or Alexander the Great. Here's some cultural things that you see in this painting that show you kind of what the Hellenistic culture kind of comprised of: beautiful architecture, statues that looked very realistic, gold from Africa and some other places. You have peoples from all over the place, silk and other fine fabrics. You have plants and plant life and water life and sea life all coming together in this painting, kind of showing you the lavishness of the Hellenistic era. And, Hellenistic culture in Alexandria was very sophisticated. As a result of Alexander's policies, a new vibrant culture called the Hellenistic culture emerged, and the Greek blended with Egyptian, Persian, and Indian cultures. So the people ended up intermingling and mixing with these people and their culture also. The life in the Hellenistic world was very interesting. The monarchy replaced democracy. Women gained more rights and could receive education and gain property. Trade and cultural diversity became very strong. Alexandria, and actually, Alexander the Great named lots of cities after him. There's Alexandria in Egypt, there's Alexandria in Southwest Asia, several cities named Alexandria. And so he kind of put his name and stamp on everything. But the Egyptian city becomes the center of the Hellenistic civilization. This is Alexandria, Egypt. And it becomes an international community through commerce. And this is a nice statue, a Greek statue, showing you the Hellenistic opulence. All right, so the Hellenistic culture in Alexandria. Alexandria's attractions include a lighthouse called the Pharos, stands over 350 feet tall, and the museum contains art galleries, a zoo, botanical gardens, a dining hall, and there's a library that holds masterpieces of ancient literature, and it supports the scholars. So there's a lot going on in Alexandria. It's a place of learning. Science and technology. Scholars preserve the Greek and Egyptian learning in the sciences. These sciences include astronomy, and there's an astronomer called Aristarchus, who proves the sun is larger than the Earth. Yeah, they had to prove that. Things that we know now today to be completely true, people had to discover that. And the purposes of the planets was to revolve around the sun, and that was not accepted for 14 centuries. His his studies were not accepted for 1400 years. Okay, Eratosthenes uses geometry to calculate the Earth's circumference, and mathematics and physics. Euclid, the mathematician, has elements, comes up with elements, the basis for courses in geometry. And Archimedes is a scientist, and his ideas helped to build the force pump and the steam engine. So these people were very educated and they were scholarly. All right, Stoicism and Epicureanism. Zeno founds the Stoic school and promoted the virtuous, simple lives of Stoicism. Epicurus is when people believe that they should focus on sense or perceive. So this was the different ideologies or philosophies that also came up in ancient Greece in the Hellenistic era. Realism in sculpture. Um, One very great example of realism in sculpture is the Colossus of Rhodes. The Hellenistic bronze sculpture was over 100 feet tall, and the sculptors moved to non classical natural forms and real people. So it looks so real, and this is example of it, the Colossus of Rhodes. All right, you could pause the video and decide, was ancient Athens truly democratic? The key terms and vocabulary: Hellenistic, Alexandria, Euclid, Archimedes, Colossus of Rhodes.